Hi, and welcome to Reddit Confessions. Grab your headphones, because this isn't just another heartbreak story. This one begins with a jar of pickles and a receipt for yoga pants that weren't mine. I was standing in the middle of aisle 7 at a discount grocery store, fluorescent lights humming overhead, holding a leaking jar of garlic dills in one hand and a crumpled shopping list in the other. When it hit me, I was no longer shopping for two. And somehow, that dumb realization stung more than when she actually left. Let me rewind. My name's Monroe. Yeah, it sounds like an old jazz singer or a misnamed county, I get it. I'm 38, I own 5 cardigans, and I cry during car commercials. I'm not a guy people write songs about. I'm the background noise in someone else's melody. And for 5 years, I was the background noise in Becca's life. We were married. Or, to be more precise, she was married technically while emotionally auditioning for someone better. I didn't see it. Or maybe I did and just chose not to confront it, like that slow puncture in your tire you keep forgetting about until your car veers off on a rainy Tuesday. She said those words, on a perfectly average Monday while I was microwaving leftover lasagna. Let's take a break. I need to feel like myself again. No raised voice. No fight. Just that flat, casual sentence like she was suggesting we try a new laundry detergent. I asked if it was something I did. She said, no. It's just me. I need clarity. And like a fool, I nodded. Said something pathetic like, okay, if that's what you need. Then I offered her the last piece of garlic bread. She declined. She packed an overnight bag like she was going to a wellness retreat. She left her wedding ring on the sink next to her toothbrush and a coupon for almond milk. That was 3 months ago. In that time, I've learned that taking a break is code for I've already left. I just want you to be the one to collapse first. At first, I gave her space. I didn't text. I didn't show up. I journaled. I made soup. I took up walking in circles around the apartment like a confused ghost. And then I started noticing the changes. Her social media lit up like Vegas. New selfies. New smiles. New people in the background who sure didn't look like her clarity coaches. And then, about 4 weeks in, I got the package. It was addressed to her, accidentally delivered to my door. I opened it, thinking it was one of her silly candles or ethically sourced socks. Nope. It was a hoodie. A large men's hoodie. With a note inside. Smells like you already. Can't wait to see you tonight. M. I stared at that letter like it might burst into flames. My hands shook. Not from rage, no, I'm not the rage type. From shame. From humiliation. From the realization that she was never coming back, because she never intended to. So I did the only thing I could. I took a break too. A permanent one. I didn't call her. I didn't respond when she finally texted weeks later. Hey, can we talk? I think I made a mistake. You know what I did? I sent her a picture of the hoodie, hanging from a tree in the park we used to walk in, and nothing else. That was the first time she double texted me. Then triple. Then called. And just like that, the woman who needed space was clawing her way back into mine. But this time, I wasn't moving. After I sent that picture of the hoodie dangling from a tree limb like a forgotten flag of surrender, I thought I'd feel some kind of justice. I thought maybe I'd sleep that night. Spoiler alert, I didn't. Instead, I lay awake watching the shadows on my ceiling twist and stretch while her messages rolled in one after the other. Why would you do that? Can we talk, please? I'm serious. I need to see you. I messed up. Funny how the people who need space always come sprinting back the moment you give them too much of it. By morning, I had 6 missed calls and a voicemail that began with her whispering my name like we were still close. She sounded shaky. Not theatrical tears shaky. Real shaky. It was the kind of voice that comes after realizing the door you just walked out of no longer opens from the outside. But I didn't respond. For the first time in months, maybe even years, I decided to keep my silence. Not as a strategy, not as some kind of revenge game, but because I didn't owe her my pain anymore. She'd already spent it like spare change. Over the next few days, things escalated. First, she showed up outside my building. I watched from the peephole like some cowardly detective as she stood there in that same old green coat she used to wear when we ran errands together. She stayed for 40 minutes. Just standing. Not calling, not knocking. Just waiting. Like the silence might invite her back in. I didn't open the door. 2 days later, she sent me an email. Yes, an actual email. Not a DM, not a text, a full 3-paragraph monologue titled, "What I Need You to Understand." It was written like a confession, except the kind where the person skips all the worst parts. She said she didn't mean to fall for someone else, but that she felt invisible in our marriage. That she never planned for anything to happen, that Mark just helped her rediscover parts of herself. Mark. Of course his name was Mark. She said it was over between them. That she ended it 2 weeks ago. That she realized too late the grass wasn't greener, it was just newer, and novelty fades. That she hadn't slept in days. That everything reminded her of me. And then she ended with, "I still have the key. If I leave it under your doormat, will that mean I can come home?" I didn't reply. Instead, I walked to the park, found the tree, and took down the hoodie. I put it in a donation bin. She wasn't coming back because there was nothing to come back to. She burned the bridge and now wanted to rebuild it using my spine. I thought that would be the end. But then, she found out about Callie. Not a girlfriend. Not even a date. Just someone I met at a bookstore who made me laugh so hard I snorted. Becca found out, probably through one of her digital espionage methods, and that's when the polite begging turned to something else entirely. Rage. Entitlement. Possession. She showed up again, this time shouting my name from the sidewalk like we were teenagers in a movie. My neighbors peeked through blinds. I opened the window and calmly said, "This isn't helping you." Her face crumbled. And that's when I knew. The break she asked for. She never thought it would break her. I think the moment it really sunk in for her, the moment she realized I wasn't some extension of her emotional convenience, was when I walked right past her outside the bakery and didn't even pause. Just a casual nod. Like she was someone I once stood behind in line. Nothing more. I didn't plan it. I didn't rehearse it. But I knew she saw the difference instantly. Because her reaction wasn't confusion, it was panic. That silent, wide-eyed desperation when someone starts to sense they're losing control over a narrative they used to write in bold. I could hear her footsteps following me, quick and uneven. The kind of steps people take when they're trying to catch up to a mistake they thought would never outrun them. I could have turned around. Could have spared her dignity. But I didn't. I just kept walking until I reached my car, got in, and drove off. No rage. No words. Just distance. That was the moment she unraveled. 2 hours later, I got a message from her sister, someone I hadn't heard from since our wedding rehearsal dinner when she spilled wine on my shirt and laughed for 3 straight minutes. "Hey. Becca's not okay. You really hurt her. I'm not trying to pick sides, but could you at least talk to her? She hasn't eaten in days." I stared at the message, trying to decide if I should feel something. Maybe I should have. Maybe the old me would have driven straight to her apartment with soup and that weird tea she liked that smelled like burnt wood. But instead, I blocked her sister's number. Because no one checked if I'd eaten when I was sleeping on the couch crying into a hoodie that didn't belong to me. No one messaged her when I was pacing the hallway at 2 a.m. wondering why, taking space, felt so much like being abandoned. Still, I'm not cold. I'm not heartless. I'm just tired. Later that night, I saw that Becca had posted a black and white photo of herself on Instagram with a quote about regret being the cruelest teacher. I knew it wasn't for her followers. It was for me. Every caption, every story, all of it suddenly felt like some breadcrumb trail she was leaving to guide me back to her. Only this time, I wasn't following. Because something had changed. Not just in me, but around me. People I hadn't talked to in years started reaching out. Friends I thought I'd lost in the shuffle of her social circle said they missed me. One even told me, "I always wondered how you put up with her moods." And it stung. Because I had made those moods my responsibility. I had been the sponge. Soaking up her dissatisfaction, her silence, her cold sarcasm disguised as wit. And for what? To be discarded the moment someone with tighter jeans and a rooftop apartment came along? The final push came 3 nights later. She showed up at my door. Not outside. Not texting. At the door. And she used the key. I was sitting on the couch, rewatching an old documentary about the ocean, because that's what I do when my brain is too loud. She walked in without knocking and just stood there in the entryway like a stranger who realized too late she'd entered the wrong house. She looked ruined. That's the word. Like someone who'd played a high-stakes game and bet everything she couldn't afford to lose. "I just wanted to talk," she said. Her voice was thin, like the echo of someone who'd screamed themselves hoarse. I didn't yell. Didn't rise. Just muted the TV. "You used the key," I said, calmly. "I didn't know if you'd answer," she replied. "That's the point," I said. And then I stood up, walked over, gently took the key from her hand, and dropped it in the little bowl by the door, the one that used to hold our car keys, spare change, and gum wrappers from our road trips. "You're not the same person," she whispered, almost like it was a compliment. "I know," I said. "And neither are you." That's when she broke. Right there. In the hallway where we once slow danced to terrible indie songs, she collapsed into a mess of apologies and trembling fingers. She kept saying things like, "I didn't mean for it to go this far," and, "I thought you'd still be waiting." I didn't say anything. Because sometimes, the loudest thing you can do, is leave the silence untouched. The morning after Becca showed up at my apartment, I expected silence. Maybe shame. Maybe one of those long, wordy texts she was always good at crafting, the kind that tried to spin guilt into poetry. What I didn't expect, was the firestorm. I woke up late, which was rare for me, and found my phone exploding with notifications. Calls. Messages. Mentions. Apparently, sometime between her breakdown at my door and the sun coming up, Becca had taken to social media like a woman cornered. She posted a carefully filtered photo of us from our 2nd anniversary, the one at the lake, where I'm grinning like a fool and she's holding a wine glass with her signature smug half-smile, and wrote, "When you love someone enough to forgive the pain they caused, but they'd rather pretend you never existed." It was vague. Strategic. But it had teeth. Within hours, people were reacting. Old acquaintances, some of her friends, even mutuals I barely knew were commenting things like, "You deserve better," and, "He doesn't know what he lost." One even DM'd me to call me a narcissist, a word that gets thrown around like confetti when someone doesn't want to admit they burned the house down and found themselves cold. And yet, I said nothing. Not because I didn't have a defense. Oh, I had volumes. Screenshots. Journal entries. Voice memos I'd recorded just to process my own spiraling thoughts when she left. But I didn't post them. I didn't comment. Instead, I went to work. Clocked in at the small community center where I'd recently started helping with the after-school writing program. I smiled at the kids. Listened to one of them recite a poem about his dog. And all the while, in the back of my mind, Becca's digital bonfire was raging. By late afternoon, my sister called. "You need to say something," she urged. "She's painting this like you ghosted her after she had a breakdown." "I did," I said. "But only after she erased me first." "You think people are gonna ask for the full timeline," she snapped. "No one reads nuance anymore, Monroe." She was right. But I still didn't post. Because Becca didn't want closure. She wanted control. And I wasn't going to hand it back to her with a carefully curated rebuttal. But things didn't end there. They never do when someone feels like they're losing the stage they built for themselves. The next twist came at the community center itself. I had just finished helping a 7th grader work on a short story about a haunted violin. Honestly, it was better than half the stuff I wrote in college, when our program director pulled me aside. "Monroe, this is awkward," she said, fiddling with her necklace. "We received a message from someone claiming you're emotionally unstable, and that you're using the center to rebuild your image after a toxic breakup." My heart didn't just sink, it imploded. I asked who sent it. She wouldn't say. But I didn't have to ask. I knew. And that was when I realized Becca wasn't just unraveling, she was dismantling. Piece by piece, trying to reduce me to a version of myself that fit her victim story. So I did something I hadn't done in months. I wrote. Not a post. Not a tweet. Not a clever comeback. I wrote a letter. To myself. It was 5 pages long, handwritten, raw, ugly, and honest. I didn't hold back. I admitted that yes, I had failed too. I had become too passive. I let things slide. I avoided confrontation. I stayed quiet when she mocked me in public because I thought, that's just how she is. But I also reminded myself of the things I did right. I supported her career when mine was falling apart. I cooked for us when she couldn't remember the last time she'd gone grocery shopping. I held her when she had panic attacks, even after she said I was the reason she felt trapped. That letter didn't go viral. It didn't make anyone choose sides. But it saved me. Because when someone tries to rewrite your character in their story, the most powerful thing you can do, is start writing your own. You know how people say, the truth always comes out eventually. I used to think that was just something people told themselves to cope with injustice. A pretty phrase for people who don't have the power to speak louder than lies. But as it turns out, the truth does come out, just not always in the way you expect. Sometimes it leaks, slowly, clumsily, and exactly when your hands are too tired to hold it up yourself. After Becca's not-so-subtle public meltdown and the bizarre email sent to the community center, I thought things had reached their peak. I figured she'd scream into the void for a few more days, maybe update her playlist with sad indie songs, and then move on to her next reinvention. That's what she always did. Becca wasn't the type to sit still in her grief, she performed it. But then something unexpected happened. She got sloppy. It started with a podcast appearance. One of those niche lifestyle shows hosted by people who believe crystals can cure trauma. I guess one of her friends, or one of Mark's, I don't even know anymore, invited her on to talk about self-growth after heartbreak. I only knew about it because a coworker from the center sent me the link, unsure whether to laugh or be concerned. I listened to it. Alone. At night. With the lights off. Because I needed to hear what version of me she'd serve up this time. She started calm. Measured. She talked about reclaiming space, how she reconnected with her intuition, how she realized she had been living a life that wasn't her own. But then, about 20 minutes in, things started to wobble. Her voice cracked. She stumbled over a sentence about emotional support. And then she said something that made my skin crawl. I used to think he was the kind one. The quiet one. But sometimes, silence is manipulation too. It was a masterstroke. Subtle enough to slide under the radar, but sharp enough to slice if you knew where to look. And yet, this time, it didn't land the way she wanted it to. Because 5 minutes later, the host, some woman named Layla with a voice like wind chimes, responded with something that stopped Becca cold. "Do you think maybe, you confused your guilt with his silence?" There was a pause. Long uncomfortable. And then Becca gave the softest, "maybe," I've ever heard. That moment broke something. Not just in the interview, but in the whole narrative she'd spent months sculpting. The comments under the podcast didn't go the way she planned either. Some people called it empowering. But others started asking questions. Why does this story sound so one-sided? She left him, right? Why is she making herself the victim? Why does she keep using phrases like "I needed to feel again" without ever saying what actually happened? And that was when people, friends, mutuals, total strangers, started quietly reaching out to me. Some apologized. Others said they believed her at first but didn't know what to think anymore. One message, though, stood out. It was from a girl named Ava, someone I'd met once, maybe twice, during a game night at Becca's old coworker's place. "Hey, Monroe. I know we barely know each other, but I just want to say. I saw the podcast. And I saw her during that whole break. You didn't deserve any of this." She wasn't honest with anyone. I didn't reply. But I sat with that message for hours. Not because I needed validation, but because it confirmed what I had quietly suspected for months. Becca's truth wasn't the truth. It was a carefully rehearsed monologue, constantly rewritten depending on the audience. And now, the audience was starting to turn. Meanwhile, my life, the one she assumed would collapse without her, was starting to take shape again. Slowly. Awkwardly. Beautifully. I'd signed up to audit a writing class. I'd started helping a friend design a curriculum for high schoolers who didn't feel seen by the standard education system. I even adopted an old, grumpy cat named Spencer who hated everyone except me and one broken heater vent. And the best part? I hadn't posted about any of it. Because healing isn't a performance. And forgiveness, real forgiveness, isn't owed to someone just because they regret getting caught. What Becca didn't understand is that the break she asked for wasn't a pause button on my life. It was a permission slip. To stop waiting. To stop explaining. To stop setting myself on fire just to keep her warm. And once that switch flipped, she couldn't undo it. Not with tears. Not with guilt. Not even with public self-immolation disguised as self-awareness. There's a certain type of silence that feels heavier than sound, the kind that hums in the background of your day like something waiting to explode. That's how it felt the week after the podcast aired. I didn't hear from Becca. No texts. No calls. No vague, guilt-soaked Instagram quotes. Nothing. At first, I thought maybe she'd finally let go. That maybe the moment of honesty on air, the subtle unraveling in front of a mic and 1,000 strangers, had finally been her full stop. But I should have known better. Becca was never good at letting things die quietly. She always needed the final word, even if it meant carving it into something that didn't belong to her. It started small. I got a follow request from a new Instagram account. No profile picture. No posts. Username was something random, a mix of letters and numbers. I ignored it. The next day, I got another. Then another. And then a message from someone I didn't know. "Hey, are you the guy Becca used to be with? Just curious, heard some stuff." I didn't respond. But it became clear what was happening. She was trying to find out if I was seeing anyone. Not directly. Not openly. But through proxies. Through anonymous peeks. She'd lost access to my life and was now pacing around it like a locked-out ex circling a house with the lights on. Then one evening, just as I was locking up the center after a late workshop, I saw it. A note. tucked under my windshield wiper. It was handwritten, shaky, rushed, folded 3 times like she couldn't decide whether to deliver it at all. I opened it in the driver's seat with shaking hands. You don't get to pretend I never existed. I'm not some phase you outgrew. You said we were real. You said forever. Don't rewrite the story just because I made one mistake. No name. No signature. But it didn't need one. I stared at the paper so long I didn't realize I'd started crying, not out of fear, but exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that comes when someone tries to drag you back into a fire you finally crawled out of. I didn't tell anyone about the note. I just threw it in the glove box, drove home in silence, and sat on my couch for hours with Spencer curled up on my lap, purring like a tiny engine that refused to let me fall apart. But it didn't stop there. 3 nights later, Callie, the woman I had seen casually just a few times, called me in a panic. I hadn't spoken to her in over a week. Things between us were friendly, light, nothing serious. She showed up at my apartment, she said, her voice shaky. Your ex. She knew my name. She didn't knock. Just stood outside for like 20 minutes. Staring. Then left. My heart sank. I felt that old familiar shame creeping in, the same shame I used to carry every time Becca made a scene, twisted a story, or turned her own chaos into a storm I had to shelter her from. I'm so sorry, I whispered. I'll handle it. Callie was kind. Too kind. She said she wasn't scared, just confused. She said, she looked wrecked. Not angry. Just empty. And maybe that should have softened me. But it didn't. Because showing up to a stranger's home, uninvited, isn't sorrow, it's control. It's desperation dressed as mourning. And that's when I finally understood. She didn't want me back. Not really. She just couldn't stand that I'd survived her absence. That I'd rebuilt, even if shakily. That I was no longer orbiting her emotional chaos. That I had stories and smiles that didn't begin or end with her. So I changed the locks. Blocked every account. I even talked to a lawyer friend about filing a no-contact order, not because I feared her, but because I needed to finally say, with every ounce of my existence, that I was done being the background character in her drama. I was writing a new story now. One with boundaries. One where silence wasn't punishment, it was peace. But I should have known. Becca wasn't finished. Not yet. Because people like her, people who build their identity through the reflection of others, don't disappear quietly. They self-destruct, publicly. There's a kind of desperation that doesn't look like tears. It doesn't sound like shouting or begging. It shows up in the quiet, messy places, in the wrong time, the wrong crowd, and always, the wrong stage. And when Becca finally cracked for real, it wasn't in some dramatic one-on-one conversation or behind closed doors. It was in front of everyone. People who knew her. People who didn't. And unfortunately for her, people with cameras. It happened at a bookshop. Not just any bookshop, the one where we first met. I hadn't stepped foot in it for years, and frankly, I never planned to. But it still existed, with its chipped wooden counter and that awkward corner where the reading chairs faced a stained carpet instead of anything resembling a view. And that's where she decided to do it. It was some sort of community event, an open mic night about healing and self-expression. I only knew about it because a friend of mine from the writing center texted me. Becca's here. You won't believe what she's saying. Check the live stream. I should have ignored it. But I didn't. I clicked the link and instantly saw her, standing under a soft spotlight, gripping the mic like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her makeup looked smudged, her voice was trembling, but she still wore that familiar cloak of dramatics, every sentence layered with pauses, with tears right on cue. She was reading from something. A journal maybe. Or one of those letters you never send, people romanticize online. He didn't hit me. He didn't scream. But silence can be a form of violence too. People murmured. Some nodded. Others just stared. I gave him everything, she continued. My vulnerability. My chaos. And when I fell apart, he didn't catch me. He just watched. She started crying then. Real or rehearsed, I'll never know. And then, she made a mistake. A big one. And now, while I wake up every night trying to forget the sound of his silence, he's out there with her. That blonde from the poetry meetups. The one who writes about broken vases like it's some kind of art form. There it was. Names. Specifics. Accusations. All live-streamed. All saved. The video spread fast. I didn't share it. I didn't comment. But people did. People who knew me. People who had heard her podcast. People who had seen how carefully she tried to rewrite the past. And suddenly, her own words became the wrecking ball she couldn't dodge. Comment after comment. Wait, didn't she leave him? So she stalked his new partner. This isn't healing, this is unraveling. It's giving main character syndrome, TBH. And it got worse. Someone from the event posted behind-the-scenes footage of her being asked, gently, to step down after going off script. She refused. Security was called. And when she was escorted out, she screamed at someone in the audience to stop looking at me like I'm insane. The damage was done. Not by me. Not by revenge. But by the very thing she used to control every room, her voice. I received a message from Callie the next morning. A single sentence. You don't need to say anything. Everyone sees it now. And they did. Becca went silent for 3 days. Social media, wiped. Podcast episodes, deleted. Even her closest enablers, the ones who once reposted her quotes and praised her courage, suddenly stopped tagging her. I should have felt victorious. Vindicated. But I didn't. I just felt tired. Because even when the truth wins, it doesn't come without cost. I had spent months dragging myself out of that emotional trench. Trying to make peace with my own reflection again. Learning how to sit with my sadness instead of outsourcing it to someone else. And now, I had to watch the person who once held my heart like it was fragile china completely implode in front of strangers. And still, I didn't respond. No post. No statement. No reaction. But I did do one thing. I packed up the last few things I still had from our time together, old photos, that dumb candle she insisted smelled like hope, the playlist I couldn't listen to anymore, and I took a drive. Not to throw them out. Not to burn them. I buried them. Literally. A small box in the woods behind the writing center. A place only I knew. A ritual not of anger, but closure. Because I finally understood what the break was really about. It wasn't just distance. It wasn't punishment. It was the universe's way of separating a man who was finally learning to speak, from a woman who only knew how to scream. It's been 6 months. That's how long it's been since the last message. Since the last knock on my door. Since the last time Becca's name popped up on my screen like an echo from a version of my life I no longer belonged to. And in those 6 months, something happened that I didn't think was possible for someone like me. I started breathing without effort. There's no dramatic twist here. No final confrontation. Becca didn't show up with a suitcase in the rain. She didn't make one last public plea. She simply disappeared. Maybe she left town. Maybe she's reinventing herself again under a new brand of healing. I don't know. And, for the first time in a long time, I don't need to know. Because my life no longer bends around the gravity of her chaos. I kept the job at the writing center. I even helped launch a new mentorship program for kids who don't fit into neat boxes. The ones who are too quiet, too strange, too emotional. The ones who remind me of a younger version of myself, the boy who thought being soft meant being small. And Callie? We stayed in touch. Slowly. Carefully. She's not some replacement character in my story. She's her own chapter, unfolding at a pace that doesn't require rushing. She brings tea when I forget to eat. She laughs at my awful jokes. She knows how to sit in silence without needing to fill it with noise. Last week, she gave me a small gift. A new journal. Inside the front cover, she wrote. To the man who thought being broken meant being unworthy. You weren't broken, just waiting to bloom. I didn't cry. Not right away. But when I sat down later that night, with Spencer asleep beside me and the windows cracked open to let in the spring air, I flipped to a blank page and started writing again. Not to process pain. Not to survive it. But to celebrate the fact that I'd made it through. That sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is walk away from the person who taught you how to hate yourself. And so, if you're listening right now, wherever you are, however lost you might feel, let this be your sign. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to start over. And you are allowed to be happy without permission from the one who hurt you. Thank you for following my story here on Reddit Confessions. If any part of this story reminded you of something you've lived through, or walked away from, drop it in the comments. Tell us about the moment you finally chose yourself. Or the time life surprised you in the best way after everything fell apart. We read them all. And trust me, someone out there needs your voice just as much as you once needed theirs. See you in the next confession. And until then, take care of your heart. You only get one.